What's up guys, it's SCG here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to clean out your PlayStation 5 console. Now I'm going to break this video down into two stages of cleaning. The first stage is going to be a basic clean out of the PlayStation 5 console, and for this you're not really going to need too many tools or even experience taking apart electronics. The second stage is going to be a deep clean of the PlayStation 5 console, and for this you will need more tools and you're going to need to be comfortable taking apart electronics and working with them. Now for the basic clean out of the PlayStation 5 we are going to need some canned air, or you can also use an electric duster like I have right here. And then you're also going to need some kind of brush to loosen the dust in the console. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using an old toothbrush. And then optionally, you can also use some isopropyl alcohol and a microfiber cloth to clean out some of the caked and stuck on dust that is inside of the console. You can also use a vacuum cleaner. It's too big to put on my table here, but you can use that to suck out some of the dust from inside of the console. For the deep clean, you're going to need everything we're going to use for the basic clean, along with a screwdriver with a Phillips and a T8 security bit. You're also going to need some kind of anti-static protection, so you can either use a wrist strap like I'm going to use for this video, or you can also use a metal object. I have this microphone stand which is made out of metal. As long as you're discharging static onto a metal object every now and then, you should be fine. Lastly, I also like to use some kind of tray to organize the screws that are going to be coming out of the PlayStation 5. There are a lot of small and unique screws that are easy to mix up, and it can be challenging trying to remember which screws go where, so I find a tray like this handy. For this video, I'm also going to be using some pry tools as well as a Swiffer duster, but these are completely optional. And of course, the last thing you'll need is a well-lit and flat work area to take apart the PlayStation 5. To start the basic clean, begin by powering down your PlayStation 5. Once the white light has completely gone out, unplug all cables from the PlayStation 5 and set it in a flat work area. Do not put the PlayStation 5 on carpet or tablecloth, as the static buildup can damage the console. Try to find a wooden or plastic table to work on in a well-lit area, preferably with tile or wood floors, once again to avoid any static discharge. The first thing we're going to do is remove the stand by unscrewing the one screw holding it in. You should be able to do this with your hands, but you may need a Phillips screwdriver if it is in too tightly. Once the screw is out, set the stand aside along with the screw. Now that the stand has been removed, we can take off the cover plates. To remove the cover plate on the side without the disk drive, orient the PlayStation 5 as you see here, and then slide the plate up and to the right. To remove the plate on the side with the disk drive, once again orient the PlayStation 5 as you see here, and then slide the plate down and to the right. With the plates removed, we can start cleaning out the inside of our console. Grab your canned air and dust out the loose dust on top. Next, we can use our brush and clean the fins and fan area. Slowly work the dust out by going over each of the components with the brush. You don't necessarily have to remove the dust, just loosen it for the next stage. Lastly, go over one more time with the air duster to remove any loosened dust. Once this is all done, we can flip the console over and do the same process on the other side. Here we also have some holes for sucking out dust with a vacuum cleaner. If you have one, take your vacuum and place it over the hole. It doesn't need to go in all the way, it just needs to cover the opening. These two holes lead right to the center of the PlayStation 5 where the cooling system is, so if your vacuum is powerful enough, it should get all the dust out. If there's a lot of caked or stuck on dust anywhere, use a paper towel or microfiber cloth with some isopropyl alcohol to loosen and remove it. Now I'm going to flip the console back over, and to finish it off, the last thing I like to do is to just go over the cover plates with some of the canned air to clear off the last of that loose dust. And that does it for the basic clean. This process should have cleaned out about 90% of the dust that was in your PlayStation 5 console, and generally the basic clean is as far as you really need to go in cleaning your PlayStation 5 console. If you're done and ready to put the cover plates back on, skip ahead to this timestamp right here. However, there are times when we need to go deeper into the PlayStation 5 console to clean it even more thoroughly, and that's what I'll be showing you next with the deep clean. Once again, you will need more tools in order to complete the deep clean, so be sure you have some anti-static protection and a screwdriver with a Phillips and T8 security bit. Once again, make sure you're also comfortable taking apart electronics and handling the components. If you're worried about Sony's manufacturer warranty on the PlayStation 5 console, you really don't have to. In the US and Europe, Sony is legally required to allow consumers to take apart their PlayStation 5s for the purpose of cleaning and repairs. However, if you are in another part of the world, or if you have a retail warranty on the PlayStation 5 console, then these rules may not apply. To start taking apart the PlayStation 5, we're first going to have to remove the fan. Unscrew the screws around the edge here, holding the cover in place. For the screws on the outer edge, we'll first have to remove this plastic fin piece. Just pull up on it and it should pop out. Once the fin piece is out, we can remove the last 2 screws underneath it. As you're removing screws, be sure to keep them organized in a tray or cup. I will be helping you with matching the correct screws in the reassembly process, but it helps to keep them organized. With the fan screws removed, we can take off the protective cover and set it aside. Remove the paper piece covering the fan port with your fingernail or a pry tool, and then unplug the fan cable from its port. When you are pulling the cable out, try not to pull on these wires here as it can damage them. Pull on this plastic piece here and not the outer port piece. I'd recommend some pliers to grip the cable as it can require some force to yank it out. With the wire removed, we can take out the fan assembly and clean it separately. Grab your brush and once again clean the fins, loosening the dust that has built up. After the dust has been loosened, go over the fan with some canned air and then set it aside for now. We can now bring our attention back to the PlayStation 5, specifically to where the fan just was. If you look inside here, you can see the heatsink fins that cool the CPU. Carefully go over these with a brush and loosen any built-up dust, and then go over with the canned air to blow the dust out. Now at this point, you could once again stop because the majority of the dust will build up in the 2 areas we just cleaned out. So if your PS5 looks clean at this point, you can stop and reassemble it. But if you see dust further down in the console, or if you want to be extra thorough, we can continue on. We are now going to remove this plastic cover here and the disk drive and access the motherboard and heatsink. Let's first remove the M.2 cover, and if you have an M.2 SSD installed, remove that as well. Next, go around the edge and remove all the screws you see here. Don't forget the one that's underneath this little piece of tape. With those gone, we can unplug this cable here. We can now go ahead and remove this plastic cover. It should easily come off, so if you are experiencing significant resistance, check for any screws you may have missed. With the plastic cover gone, we can now see some of the motherboard along with the cooling system. The disk drive isn't held in by any screws at this point, just this ribbon cable here. Push down on this silver button and then pull the ribbon cable out. You can now take the disk drive out and set it aside. Now let's go ahead and unplug everything from the motherboard. I'm going to start with these smaller ribbon cables here around the edge. These guys can just be pulled out. Next, I'm going to remove the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna cables. Be gentle with these and try to only pull up from the gold piece and not from the wire. You'll also have to remove the tape holding the cables in place. Lastly, the larger ribbon cable here in the middle can be removed if you pull on the cable and press the little gray lever here. Now for the screws. Flip the console over and unscrew these screws here and here. Flip the console back over and unscrew this black screw here, and then unscrew the 41 small silver screws here. Whatever you do, just don't unscrew these 2 here on the motherboard. With all the screws out, we can now lift off the metal plate. This will require some effort. Just be careful and make sure you didn't leave any screws in before you apply too much force. Once the metal plate has been popped out, we can go over it with some canned air and set it aside. We can now see the PlayStation 5 motherboard in its full glory. The last thing holding it in place right now is this ribbon cable here at the top. This guy was tricky for me to get out, so you may need some pliers to fully remove it. Make sure to press the little tab at the top while you're pulling the cable out. With everything removed, we can now take the motherboard out of the case. Be extremely careful removing the motherboard. It is going to be heavy because of that heatsink on the bottom, but try not to be too forceful. When I removed the motherboard, I also grabbed the power supply as well, but they're not attached, so if yours is still in the case, go ahead and take that guy out. Go over the inside of the case with some canned air. You can also use a duster or a cloth to clean it out as well. There's probably going to be a decent amount of dust in this part due to the fact that air flows directly through here and into the fan. We can now go over the power supply with the air duster. Just try to blow some air through these holes here. Set those both aside, and now we can focus on the motherboard. Just do a quick air dust over the top of the board and then flip it over to the heatsink side. We should have already cleaned out some of the dust when we went over it with our brush and air duster, but go over once again with that brush and then use some isopropyl alcohol and cloth where needed, and then blow it all out with the canned air. Now each component of your PS5 should be clean and dust free. Now it's time to put it all back together. Put the power supply back in like so. You should see the power port aligned with the cutout on the back. Next, grab the motherboard and place it down over the power supply. Make sure all the cables go over the motherboard and don't get stuck underneath it. Plug that tricky ribbon cable back in and set the metal plate back over the board. Align it with the screw holes and the curve of the fan cutout on the right side. Now go ahead and screw in those 41 small silver screws. You're not going to be putting screws in all the holes you see here. A little trick you can use to avoid putting the screws in the wrong holes is to look for the screw holes with the lines through them. These are for the next layer, so leave those screw holes empty. After you've put in all of these small silver screws, go ahead and screw in the black screw right here. This black screw has a thicker thread. Go ahead and flip the console back over and put in those other two black screws. These two here have a thinner thread. Now plug in all of the ribbon and antenna cables that you see here. Push on the tabs for the larger ribbon cables to fit them in all of the way, and then make sure the antenna cables are matched to the colors you see here. We can now set the disk drive in place. Make sure to align the screw holes for it and then plug the ribbon cable in. Grab the large plastic cover piece, put it on top, and screw in the screws holding it in place. There's another trick here we can use to match our screws. These small arrows next to the screw hole match the screw type. Thick threaded screws match the all black arrows, while the thin threaded screws match the thin outline arrows. Also, don't forget the last small silver screw that goes on the disk drive. Go ahead and plug in the connector cable. It doesn't matter which side goes where. We can now set the fan back in place and plug it in. Don't screw it in yet like I did, as we still have to add the fan cover. Install the M.2 and its protective cover. Put the paper sticker and the screw sticker back in place and screw the fan cover in. You can use the same screw and arrow trick that we used earlier for the plastic cover. Snap the fin piece back in place. This may be a little bit tricky, just make sure you get both of the notches in the cutouts. Lastly, put the cover plates back in place by sliding them towards the top of the console and then screw the stand back in. And that's it. You've successfully cleaned out your PlayStation 5 console. I will say I'm honestly impressed at how little dust was in my PlayStation 5 console. I've had this guy for about 2 years, and all the dust you saw coming out on camera was that dust that had accumulated over the 2-year period I've owned the PlayStation 5. So kudos to Sony for making a console that is way better at repelling dust, especially better than the PlayStation 4. Of course, if you have your console in a dustier environment, you may have different results. If there's a lot of dust and hair in your console and it's heating up the PlayStation 5, you should really consider moving it to a different location. I try to keep mine away from windows, away from any pets or carpets, so try to keep yours elevated off the floor and away from any walkways or windows where dust is going to be flowing a lot more. Other than that, that pretty much does it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like down below. If you have any questions about this tutorial, be sure to leave those in the comment section down below. I'll try to answer those as quickly as possible. If you love my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Other than that, I've been Steven, your semi-comprehensive guide, and be sure to have a wonderful rest of your day.